Bye weeks are so incredibly important in best ball because you can't change your lineup. You can't grab somebody off the waiver wire. You don't make changes. So you've got to be prepared. If you're taking 4 quarterbacks because you want to be sure you got to be very methodical about the schedule, especially the bye weeks.
Yeah, that's a good point by you because I don't, in redraft leagues and in especially in dynasty leagues, I don't give a damn about bye weeks in a dynasty league. I'm taking the talent that I need, especially if it's like a startup dynasty league, man. And so, that's created situation. Matt Deutsch's league last year, I had a glut of, it was like week 9, I seem to remember. It was the bye week of death for me. Like, it's a 2 quarterback league. I had a bunch of QBs. They were like all on the bye at the same week. It was insane. Yeah, at best ball, you've got to really be strategic about that. And it's almost more important than the statistics that you might put next to the player as the bye week to let you know, no, I can't go there because I got this guy, this guy, and this guy already.
You have an opportunity to get a quarterback you want, but your first 2 have the same bye week. You just can't do that to yourself. You have to be thinking it through. I do pay attention to bye weeks in my drafts. I just do. It makes me a lot less of a struggle bus situation when it comes to Mageddon. I don't want to have 4 players. I don't want to have all my wide receivers and just be playing scrubs. I don't want to have to get rid of a player that I like, that's healthy, that's performing for me just because out of desperation.
You're good. All right, welcome back to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Apologize for the technical difficulties we're having. I do want to pitch this back to Ryan McDowell from Dynasty League Football at Ryan Mick23, Ryan MC23 on Twitter. I was talking about Clyde Edwards-Helaire before, and I think the thing to keep in mind is even when you have a short bench in Dynasty Leagues like the FFPC Dynasty Leagues, I think what you have to keep in mind is he is an injury-away type guy, and while you probably will only use him 1, 2, maybe 3 weeks out of the season, those 3 weeks could be massive. This is a team that has an elite offense. It went deep into the postseason last year, winning the Super Bowl. You got to find a spot for Edwards-Helaire at this point. He is not a guy that you should be cutting loose when roster cutdown happens at the start of the season, right?
Yeah, totally agree. You got to try to hang on to him, especially as we if he continues to have some positive buzz around him and once we get into training camp. But I mean, you're absolutely right. When it comes to the Chiefs, this is a team we want to attack. We saw, as we already mentioned, Pacheco and McKinnon both have very successful weeks down the stretch, and we saw Clyde perform in the first month of the season. So we know it's there. We know this is a team we want pieces of. We just got to watch closely how that training camp goes for Clyde.
Is there because obviously the rookie drafts are behind us. Would you give up a second round future pick to acquire Edwards-Helaire? Or is that too rich for you?
No, that's more than he's worth right now, especially again in that FFPC format where there's a chance that you're cutting him. If the Chiefs cut him, then dynasty managers are cutting him. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't be giving a second in an FFPC league or honestly just your typical dynasty league.
Lamar Jackson said, according to Sarah Ellison on Twitter, said that he absolutely, quote, absolutely believes his rush attempts will be scaled back in the new offense this year, featuring offensive coordinator Todd Monken. Now, Jackson talked a lot about with Ellison, who covers the Ravens, a lot about throwing more and running less. Now, that may not necessarily be a bad thing, given that you have Zay Flowers there now. You have Odell Beckham there now. You have what we think is a healthy J.K. Dobbins. You still have Mark Andrews. You still have Rashad Bateman. But you look at how this affects his dynasty value now that the contract thing is behind us and that Baltimore went out and paid him. If he is running less but throwing more, how does that change his valuation in dynasty as far as where you would have him ranked, Ryan, knowing that, when you are in the NFL and you come in as a running quarterback, eventually those hits start to catch up with you, and you really got to find a way to move the ball passing. And I think Baltimore has given him the tools to do that this year. But your thoughts on Lamar Jackson this year? Are you surprised at his price? Does it seem like this is where he should be going? I can tell you right now in the FFPC dynasty startup drafts right now, Lamar Jackson is going off the board as quarterback 7, which I think is where he's going in redraft leagues as well. But quarterback 7 at the 4-11, again, single quarterback start leagues. Does that seem about right for you?
Yeah, I think so. He was actually quarterback 7 in our data as well. Has jumped up a little post contract, post draft. He is up to quarterback 5, but I think anywhere in that range. I would say 5 to 8. You're talking Herbert, Fields, Trevor Lawrence territory. We're going to see him in that range. I'm not too worried about the talk about the rushing attempts being scaled back. We kind of heard that last year as he was going into that contract year that maybe not as part of the offense, but maybe by his choice, he would run less. And didn't really see that play out. I mean, you look at the numbers; he was 5th in the league among quarterbacks in carries last year, even missing multiple games. The 4 seasons prior to that, he ranked either 1st or 2nd in quarterback rush attempts. So, he could stand to have that number, those rush attempts cut, potentially even in half and still do plenty of damage on the ground. We have obviously seen him. We've seen him improve as a passer. And finally, we've seen the Ravens attempt to kind of catch up to the rest of the league when it comes to their offensive game plan in general and their pass offense, not only with bringing in Zay Flowers and Beckham, but also just with the change at their offensive coordinator. I'm excited to see Beckham and Zay Flowers with Lamar, but I'm mostly excited to see Todd Monken back in the NFL.
Oh, it's going to be awesome. I think and we always talk about this every year. There's certain things that you have to get right in winning your fantasy football leagues, and Lamar Jackson and the Ravens offense, you have to get it right. If you're going to fade them and they stink, you're going to be ahead of the curve. If you fade them and they're awesome, well, you're going to be well behind the curve. So I think that's one of the things that we'll be looking at going forward as we get closer to the season. After OTAs, we start to see stuff in training camp and see how these guys are going to be deployed and how they're using Lamar Jackson as well. All right, Darnell Mooney, let's talk about him. Back to the NFC. Kevin Fishbane on Twitter reports that Matt Eberflus, the head coach of the Chicago Bears, said that Darnell Mooney is still progressing in coming back from his ankle injury. He was not at the voluntary OTAs for the Bears, and this was an injury he suffered way back in week 12. Now, in a podcast, Darnell Mooney told the 33rd team that there are screws in his foot. He will be 100%. But again, I always, and Ryan, I don't know how you feel about this, I always hesitate to take the player's word as gospel in their terms of their own injuries. The Bears have not named a timetable. This is all fine and good in any other year. Well, it's not fine and good in any other year, but this is less magnified in any other year. However, not this year, because now the Bears get a full season of Chase Claypool. The Bears are getting DJ Moore. Cole Kmet is going to be another year more experienced in this offense. At this point, like Darnell Mooney, we were very excited about him, about getting this massive target share, granted in a low volume passing offense last year. Now all of a sudden we're looking like, man, this could still be a low volume passing offense. And Mooney's getting that much shorter of a piece of the pie. Hopefully you sold on him last year. What's the method? What are you to do right now, Ryan, if you have Mooney? Is this the guy that you should be shopping and be willing to take 80, 85 cents on the dollar for? Or is he a hold and let's see what happens once the real bullets start flying in week 1?
Yeah, I'm not sure you're even getting 80 cents on the dollar for him right now. Unfortunately, the value is plummeting for really all the reasons that you just laid out. I mean, I think back to that injury week 12 range of last season. And I mean, I remember my mindset was, yeah, he has this ankle injury and the Bears are clearly packing it in and trying to get that top pick or one of the top picks. And we just never really heard much information about the injury. Honestly, I just didn't think it was that serious. And clearly it's much worse than maybe we realized at the time. But you're totally right. With DJ Moore there, Claypool, and another year for Claypool and Cole Kmet. Yeah, Mooney is falling down the ranks of that what's still a subpar pass catching group. His ADP is down to wide receiver 66 at DLF. I'm not sure what FFPC looks like, but he's another guy, honestly, in that Clyde Edwards-Helaire range where once you get to that roster cut down point in FFPC, I'm not even sure he's a lock to make those dynasty rosters.
That's a great point. And he's not much higher in the FFPC. He's wide receiver 59 right now, 1305. This is Jaden Reed, Jacoby Myers, Cedric Tillman, Michael Thomas territory as far as FFPC startups go. So yeah, I'm definitely bearish this year on Darnell Mooney. And you're right. I mean, like once it gets to be the start of the NFL season, you got to go with the 20 guys that got you there. I don't know if Mooney is going to be that guy on a lot of teams. When I was stalking your Twitter feed, Ryan, earlier within the last 48 hours, I noticed a conversation. I didn't even realize this was a thing, but maybe you can speak to it a little bit more. When we look back at the NFL draft, Jahmyr Gibbs, apparently the Jets were interested in and would have been interested in taking him with that first-round pick they acquired from the Green Bay Packers at 15. We're all freaking out about Gibbs going 12 to the Lions. Maybe his slide, or it wasn't even a slide, but maybe he wasn't even going to last very much longer anyway if the Jets were serious about taking him there. How do we apply this in Dynasty? Well, we apply it in this way. We found out from some credible sources that the Jets were in on Jahmyr Gibbs and Breece Hall in FFPC Dynasty startups right now. Running back 2 at the 106.
Ooh.
Is this too inflated of a value, knowing that it wasn't too far off that the Jets maybe were going to acquire Jahmyr Gibbs to join Breece Hall in this backfield, Ryan?
Yeah, I think it probably is. I mean, as great as Breece Hall was in during his rookie season, or at least prior to that injury, given the running back competition, they're at the top of the boards. Whether you're thinking long term with a guy like Bijan Robinson, or maybe even Gibbs potentially, or you're going win now with a guy like McCaffrey or Eckler, or whatever your strategy is, JT in that range as well. It's hard to justify Breece Hall at RB2. He's RB4 for us. And I'm starting to think maybe that's even too high based on what we know. Of course, this team still has Michael Carter and Zonovan Knight, who played well. They had Izzy Abanikanda on day 3. But just knowing that there was interest in Jahmyr Gibbs, for me, is a little scary as we wait for Breece Hall to come back from this injury. And we're still kind of scarred by J.K. Dobbins a year ago and that slow recovery from his ACL. Hopefully it's not the same issue for Breece Hall, but again, it's going to be a wait and see. I mean, long term, I'm still fine with not only fine, encouraging buying Breece Hall if there's any kind of discount, but that's really the problem. You go back to the ADP throughout the regular season, and we do collect that over at DLF, even when real startups are not necessarily happening. His value never really took a hit, right? Breece Hall, even with the injury, even with being out for the remainder of the season. With Javonte Williams, we saw the major hit in value, and we see it every year, Dobbins and Akers and all of these guys. And it didn't really happen. There was that infatuation with Breece Hall, the trust in his talent, and what we saw on the field to start his season. He remained a top 5, top 6 dynasty running back, and that's there was no buy low, there was no discount or dip to buy Breece Hall in.
Do you just shifting to Bijan Robinson real quick? He was obviously the non-superflex leagues 101. Even in superflex leagues, a lot of them, he was the 101. He's the 103 right now in FFPC Dynasty startups. He's going off the board as the running back 1. Do you agree with that? Like, if you had the 3rd pick of a startup draft and Jefferson and Chase were off the board, is Robinson the right play if you're going running back there?
If you're going running back, I think so. He's my dynasty RB1. Personally, if I have the 1-3, I'm either trading down or taking a wide receiver in those single quarterback leagues. I prefer to build around wide receiver. I do think that's the beginning of a big tier. It might be AJ Brown. It might be, Amon-Ra St. Brown is a favorite of mine. Maybe it's Waddle. Maybe it's Garrett Wilson, whoever your
CeeDee Lamb. What about CeeDee Lamb?
CeeDee Lamb, certainly in that range as well. So trading down, I think, is the optimal plan there for me, at least. And with Bijan Robinson on the board, you're going to have some takers.
Yeah. And it's just insane. I can't remember. My apologies. I want to give the proper attribution on and credit of where I saw this, but somebody tweeted out, this was like a couple of weeks ago, something to the effect of, yes, it's true. You have to give up your firstborn in order to acquire the 101 in FFPC or in Dynasty rookie drafts, or to acquire Bijan Robinson. That's where we're at right now. And quite frankly, and this is, and I don't know if you have pushback on this, Ryan, but I talk to people about it and they're like, oh, how can you take a guy who's never been on the field before that high in your dynasty draft, or even that high in your startup draft? Like, we don't know how good this guy's going to be. And I always say, well, that's true. But if you look back historically at running backs that were taken, I think in the top 10 of the NFL draft, they have a really, really high hit rate year one. And that's why, like, you know, if you're faced with that decision where you're thinking about taking Bijan Robinson high and you're locked in, like, okay, I want to take a running back, he should be the first running back off the board. The fact that he's a rookie and has never played in the NFL, we kind of got to throw that out because of what history tells us, and we throw caution in there and we take Robinson.
Yeah, no pushback at all for me. I'm not, you know, I'm not holding that against him when it comes to his value or where he should be drafted. I mean, if that's your mindset, then you're just not going to invest in rookies at all. And you're going to be behind the eight ball and behind the competition, because we see year after year, no matter how strong the rookie class is, from their rookie season to 1 year later, they are gaining value. You know, even if they don't have that breakout season. I mean, even looking at a guy like Treylon Burks or Jahan Dotson, who had, you know, they flashed, they showed some things in their rookie season, but also had some struggles and some injuries and things. Both of those players gained value based on our ADP. So rookies are a safe investment, even if your goal is to flip them after they gain some value in the coming months or year.
It's all about value, and whether that value is to you keeping those rookies on your team and watching them pile up points, or trading them for, you know, proven, veteran value or future draft capital. They present value. And I think that's something to keep in mind. If you are skittish about drafting rookies, then trade the picks, trade the players, get something else that you want to root for, because those rookies, a lot of them do end up paying off. Okay, let's move on to talk about Austin Eckler here. News this week that Eckler is going to be playing for the Chargers this year. Collective sigh of relief. The team added just under $2 million in incentives to his contract. He is going to be 28 years old this year, Ryan. And you would think that he was probably hoping for a little bit better than $1.75 million, but it is what it is. This is the NFL. We know how they treat running backs. We know how the contracts are viewed around the NFL for running backs as well. He's going to be a free agent at the end of this season. He's probably going to be playing elsewhere. Knowing that right now, knowing that he will be playing on an elite offense with Kellen Moore, a guy that I know I like, and I'm excited to see what he can do in Los Angeles. But knowing that he's going to be a free agent at the end of the season, what do you do with him in your dynasty leagues? Are you willing to keep him on your team, see what you can get out of him this year, maybe win a championship, and then, you know, move on from him? Or do you want to part ways with him now, where a team will, this is like a baseball euphemism here, that a team will get a year of control with Austin Eckler on the Los Angeles Chargers, and see what you can get back for him? Right now in FFPC Dynasty Startups, Eckler, I thought, was 305. Yeah, running back 10 at the 305 right now is where he's going. Your thoughts on how to handle Austin Eckler, Ryan?
Well, if you're in that win now window, that championship window, I'm certainly glad to keep him on my roster. We haven't seen much of a value dip. We're kind of in line with where you guys are, RB9 for us currently. Mm-hmm. But you're totally right. If you've got Austin Eckler on your roster already, you should be celebrating this week, because you look around the league and the lack of need for running backs in general, and just the lack of ideal situations. It was ugly when we thought Austin Eckler was potentially moving. Finding the landing spots that made sense from a team perspective, from a player perspective, was a difficult task. So to know we get one more year at least of Eckler in Los Angeles is great news. He did actually turn 28 just last week, as you mentioned. So we are going to see the value continue to drop no matter what he does this season. That's kind of, it's the NFL, and it's dynasty fantasy football. If as that running back gets closer to age 30, we don't want any part of them for whatever reason. But I mean, Eckler's been a top 4 running back, top 4 running back in 3 of the past 4 years. I think he could probably do it again. So if you're trying to contend this year, I absolutely want him on my roster. You just have to know what the future holds for that value.
Exactly. Totally right. And I'm kind of curious. I want to ask you a philosophical question in managing your dynasty teams. What do you do with these running backs? Like, you take Bijan Robinson early now. You take Jahmyr Gibbs early now. Maybe some people already took a guy like Jonathan Taylor early in their dynasty rookie draft. Think about guys like Christian McCaffrey. We talked about Breece Hall, Saquon Barkley. So you have these guys. You watch, you enjoy the spoils of what they can give you early on in their NFL careers. Ryan, what are you doing with these guys as they get closer to that age 27, age 28, age 29, and then age 30 season? How do you handle those guys? I know it's kind of on a case-by-case basis, but do you have a prevailing sort of train of thought on how you normally like to handle these guys as far as when's the right time to get them off your roster and cash in on them?
I think the challenge is that sell window seems to be shrinking, or maybe growing, I guess you could say, every year, right? Like we used to be worried about that player when he turned 28, when he turned 29, and now it's more like 25, 26. We're starting to worry about a player like Saquon Barkley, who just turned 26 earlier this offseason. Get him off your roster now. So that's really the challenge. Is you talk about Robinson or Gibbs, who they're 21, 22, and you think we're only going to have 2-3 years before we're looking at these players as must sells to maximize your value, and that's really the decision. Are you trying to maximize value, or are you trying to win games and hopefully win titles? And that's kind of the rub. The challenge is to do both of those if you can. That's dynasty football in a nutshell.
Yeah. It's one of those things I always say. It's what makes it so fun, and it's what makes it so maddening at the same time, because you never know. And it feels so good when you get it right, and it feels catastrophically bad when you get it wrong. DeAndre Hopkins, and last guy I want to talk about, and then I want to talk about a piece you recently wrote for DLF. But DeAndre Hopkins was on the I Am Athlete podcast, and they referenced his Instagram video where he said he never wanted to leave the Cardinals. It wasn't a statement about his interest in playing for the Cardinals, which is kind of like, I don't know if he's just can't get out of his own way, or he's just throwing a word salad at us. I don't know. But he said it was just a video of him working out. It wasn't him trying to campaign whether he should or should not be a member of the Cardinals. He said he wants to play on a team with stable management upstairs. And you say, oh my God, that's not good, because the Cardinals no longer have, I forget what his name is. Steve
Keim.
Steve Keim is no longer there. And Monty Ossenfort is now there. And apparently Ossenfort and Hopkins are coup de la, like they're cool with each other and they're on the same page. My question here is sort of something we just talked about with running backs, and it's when to know when's the right time to sell on DeAndre Hopkins. Now, you could make the case that even if you're in a win now window, maybe you believe that the Cardinals quarterback situation isn't stable enough for you to trust Hopkins over the course of a season. Although McCoy was pretty good with Hopkins last year. Maybe you believe in Marquise Brown, like he is the true number one on this team, and we're witnessing a change in the guard right now. So even if you're in a win now window, maybe you try to get, like another veteran that's on par with Hopkins, or maybe Hopkins plus. I don't know how you want to handle it, but I think it's a little bit muddier. It's a little bit more mucky than saying, well, okay, if you're trying to win a title, you keep Hopkins on your team. I think it's a little bit more complicated from that. Are you seeing it the same way as far as what you do with Hopkins in Dynasty?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we've seen the drop in production over the past couple of seasons. He had 4 straight seasons as a top 5 wide receiver. And then the past 2 years, he's been outside of the top 40. And of course, he has missed some time due to suspension, due to injury. But he's got age going against him. He'll be 31 years old soon. And you kind of alluded to the Cardinals, the quarterback situation with Kyler, certainly missing some time. We'll see how long. but really just the changing of the guard from the front office down in Arizona. I'm surprised he's still an Arizona Cardinal. Why? I mean, this is a team that's clearly looking to 2024 and beyond. Like, honestly, why do they want him on that roster still? They should have taken the day 2 or, maybe early day 3 pick that they could have gotten for him during the draft. As far as Nuke in Dynasty, honestly, I think he might be closer to a buy right now than a sell. I think the sell window has passed, maybe 18 months ago. Looking at some recent trades from the trade finder at DLF, Isaiah Pacheco, even up. Pacheco for DeAndre Hopkins for a second rounder. There were multiple examples of that. So that kind of seems to be the going rate if you want to try to acquire him. There was one trade for Calvin Ridley. I would easily prefer Calvin Ridley there. I don't think that's going to be common that you get Ridley for Hopkins. Honestly, I think Hopkins is more of a buy for me, especially if I am in that win now range, just based on the price that we've seen.
Let me ask you this, as long as we're talking about the trade finder for Dynasty League football, can you tell our viewers a little bit more about that tool?
Sure. So that's basically searches out actual dynasty leagues. We talk about our mock draft ADP and things like that, but the trade finder pulls data from actual dynasty leagues. Right now it is limited to leagues hosted on My Fantasy League, but we're certainly hoping to expand that soon. But I think it's a great tool because you can look at our rankings, you can look at ADP all you want, but the actual trades that are happening, I think, is the best reflection of the current market for a player. So if you've got DeAndre Hopkins on your roster, you think it's time to sell, go check out those trades on the trade finder, and maybe that'll change your mind.
I think it's a very valuable tool for anybody playing dynasty football, whatever platform it be, MFL, FFPC, whatever it is. Super valuable tool over at dynastyleaguefootball.com. Speaking of valuable tools, let me tell you a little bit about, and we're going to talk about Ryan's latest piece for Dynasty League Football. But remember that Fantasy Alarm has an all sports subscription right now. You get all pro access to Fantasy Alarm, the award-winning DFS playbook, 10 different sports, fantasy football, NFL betting, tools, podcasts. You get the Discord chat there as well. 50% off your first 6 months with promo code ALARM50, ALARM50, ALARM50 at fantasyalarm.com. Start your free trial today. Make sure you are taking advantage of that. Now, we have a great resource in Britt Flynn who covers fantasy football for Fantasy Alarm. I looked at her article, which you can find at fantasyalarm.com, and I compared it to your piece on Dynasty League Football about ADP risers and fallers. The only difference in this is she was looking at it from a redraft perspective. You were looking at it from a dynasty perspective, and yet we still see a couple of the same names rising up both boards. The first one I want to talk about is over in Los Angeles, and that is Van Jefferson. Van Jefferson right now is rising both in dynasty and with the piece I read from you, and then of course in redraft ADP as well. Now, it's interesting because there hasn't been anything that's been a gigantic shift in what the Rams are doing out there. They did trade Allen Robinson, obviously, to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Tyler Higbee is still there. I don't know. I'm going to ask you about Puka Nacua because I feel like every dynasty person I've talked to, I've asked about Puka Nacua. So I want to talk to you about him. But obviously, Cooper Kupp's still there. Tutu Atwell, Ben Skoranek, obviously there. Jefferson had an ADOT of 15.6 in 2022. That was the best in the NFL. 89.4% of the Rams routes was what he ran last year. Matthew Stafford is still there. You're seeing him rise up dynasty boards. Is it for the same reasons, or you think it's maybe attributed to something else as well?
No, I think it's the same reasons. I think the movement, you mentioned Allen Robinson being gone, although he wasn't necessarily a huge.
He wasn't a destroyer of worlds last year.
No, unfortunately not. Another guy I fell for, unfortunately. But yeah, A-Rob's gone. They do bring in the rookie Puka Nacua, but not until later in day 3, so they don't make that move earlier, although they didn't really have very many early picks anyway. But I think that just that perceived opportunity for Van Jefferson is what's pushing him up. And I like to compare, of course, pre-draft ADP to post-draft ADP. I looked back at our April ADP. Van Jefferson was not even drafted. We're talking about between 250 and 300 players that end up with a monthly ADP. He did not have one in April. He was off the radar at that point completely, and then jumps up to wide receiver 89 in our data. But I mean, looking at his production in 3 years, he's had one game as a wide receiver 1. He's had 3 games as a wide receiver 2. He's had plenty of opportunity already as this team has dealt with injuries, and honestly, just a kind of a weaker depth chart compared to other contenders anyway. And he still hasn't been able to make the most of that opportunity. So Van Jefferson is a player I'm avoiding. Honestly, I think he's just a guy at this point more suited to be a wide receiver 3 or 4. And we'll see if somebody like Puka Nacua or Tutu Atwell or somebody else can step up and claim that second job.
What do you think about Puka Nacua in general? Because I it's not like he was a pedigreed guy in the draft this year, but I know there's plenty of people. I mean, like Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros, we had him on a few weeks back, and he was talking about how much he loved Puka Nacua. In fact, so much that I've actually drafted him in the 4th round of a few rookie drafts because I'm like, okay, I might be missing something here. I want to make sure I get this guy on my team. Your thoughts on Nacua from a dynasty perspective, as well as what you think his instant impact could be this year? Because if he does, hit and he does, take on, sort of that second receiver role in Los Angeles, that would be a prime opportunity to flip him for something else.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited about him. And a large part of that is due to this opportunity. I think he will have to play really right away in that Rams offense. He was a guy I already liked as we kind of studied these players pre-draft. I was concerned he wouldn't get drafted. I looked at several 7-round mock drafts leading up to the NFL draft, and he was left out of a couple of those. So I was worried, even though he was a guy I was kind of liking as a later sleeper, that he wouldn't get drafted. Glad to see him not only come off in the middle of day 3, but also get a quality landing spot. I mean, his story is he's always produced, throughout his career. He's bounced around like so many players have now in college with the transfer rules, finished up at BYU and was productive throughout. It's really just a matter of staying healthy, because he's another one of these guys who has dealt with some injury issues. So I think if he stays on the field, he's going to be productive and could potentially even be the Rams wide receiver 2.
There's one other player I want to bring up. Now, Britt Flynn in her piece, once again, check that out at fantasyalarm.com, about the risers in redraft best ball leagues right now. We just talked about Van Jefferson. I want to ask you about another player that was not on I did not see him as a dynasty riser in DLF, and that's Jerome Ford. The reason I bring Jerome Ford up is because he's getting some heat right now. He's getting, as the kids say, he's getting steamed up. Zach Jackson, who covers the Browns for The Athletic, says that Jerome Ford appears headed for a much larger role this season. There's no Kareem Hunt there anymore. Dearness Johnson is not there anymore. It is Jerome Ford's backfield. I shouldn't say that. It's Jerome Ford's backfield behind Nick Chubb, right? Because Nick Chubb is obviously going to be the stud there. But your thoughts on Jerome Ford? Is this a guy that, is he worth messing around with to try to pick him up for, a 3rd-round rookie pick, a 2nd-round rookie pick in 2024, a guy that you can acquire? Because if you do acquire him, Ryan, you have to find a way to keep him on your roster for the season. I think he's going to have a couple of weeks worth of value, and maybe more than that if Chubb goes down. Chubb is not exactly the youngest running back in the world anymore. But your thoughts on Jerome Ford from a dynasty perspective?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him, because I am surprised he hasn't been more of a riser throughout the offseason, especially after the Browns let both of the other guys go, the veterans go. Kareem Hunt, I know, is still out there. I don't think the Browns sign him. Honestly, I don't think anybody signs him. I think he might be done in the league. But Jerome Ford is not. 23 years old. Ended his career at Cincinnati after being a highly ranked recruit and starting at Alabama, and had a great year for Cincinnati a couple of years ago. And because of that landing spot this time last year, really fell down rookie drafts, and of course behind Chubb, behind Hunt at the time, and almost became a forgotten player as we didn't see much of him during his rookie season. But you're totally right. I think he's going to have a lot of opportunity. Definitely need to find a spot for him. I don't think you have to pay a second rounder for him. I think you could get him for a couple third rounders, or potentially as a throw in to a larger deal.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. It's one of those things. It's I always go back to did you ever watch Django Unchained, Ryan?
Oh yeah, great movie.
Okay,
yeah.
So you remember the sequence where they're trying to figure out how to get Broomhilda back, right? And it's Jamie Foxx and it's Christoph Waltz. And you go and you say, I want to buy the horse, and the farmer says, no, I'm not going to do that. But you say, I'm going to buy the farm, and you just want the horse thrown in. Like, that's the Jerome Ford approach, right? It's like, you don't want to come up and say, hey, I'm kind of interested in acquiring Ford. Craft a larger deal and get Ford as sort of a throw-in, even though you know that he's not. So I think that's a great point that you bring up there. By the way, you can check out Britt Flynn's article, fantasyalarm.com. We're going to get into Sam Laporta later, but she talks about him there. Also, a member of my beloved Green Bay Packers is in there as well. And then a rookie running back in the AFC South that you should be paying attention to, fantasyalarm.com. I want to get back to your article at Dynasty League Football, dynastyleaguefootball.com. Let's talk about another riser. And that is one, I believe he was a riser. Irv Smith, was he a riser?
Oh, yeah.
In this? Okay, so he's in Cincinnati now. No Hayden Hurst. And I think the thing to keep in mind here with Irv Smith is this guy was more pedigreed than Hayden Hurst.
Mm-hmm.
And he's obviously dealt with some injuries and what have you. But you look at what Hurst was able to do last year. That's when they still had Chase and Higgins and Boyd. So it's like you can say like, oh, they got all those other pass catchers there. Well, yeah, but they did last year, and Hurst was great. Look at what Irv Smith can do this year. And I think that's a name that we should be paying attention to.
Yeah, totally agree. Although, I will say Hayden Hurst, kind of had, he was a first round pick, right? So
that's true. You're right. Yeah.
I guess some pedigree there. Although,
okay, so if let me make sure I'm remembering this correctly. Wasn't Hurst like older for his age or for his age,
for his class?
I think that's what it was. He was older for his class. Keep going.
Yeah. And I mean, I wouldn't say he didn't necessarily have the standout college career. He was not one of those guys, even after being a first round pick that dynasty players were chasing back in 2018. But Irv Smith was in his class. He was a day 2 pick, landed with the Vikings, looked like he had that clear path to the starting job. And like we said, with some of the other guys, just couldn't stay on the field, could not stay healthy. And then even when free agency came this year, he had to wait a while. He wasn't one of those first day or second day of free agency signings. He lasted a while out there, but ends up landing in, I think, the perfect spot, especially after Cincinnati did not draft a tight end to compete with him. The job is his if he can, if he could stay healthy. That's the big if. But at his price tag, I'm willing to gamble. 2 months ago, he was the tight end 37. Now he's tight end 22. So a big value gain based on that Cincinnati landing spot. And you're right, even competing with Chase and Boyd and T. Higgins, even if you're third or fourth on that depth chart, as much as the Bengals throw it around, you're going to see some targets.
And you say, well, bulky, who cares? It's Irv Smith, and he's tight end 22 for DLF. He's tight end 23 for FFPC. Remember, FFPC is tight end premium. So these second tight ends and sometimes these third tight ends, they do make a difference. Tight end 23, 1501 in FFPC Dynasty Startups. He's going behind Isaiah Likely, Juwan Johnson, and a guy maybe he'll move past here shortly in Dawson Knox, who we're going to get to in a little bit. Terrace Marshall, my God, the promise was there. I had him on a couple of, he's one of those guys I regretted in my leagues not getting enough. And now I'm glad I don't have a whole lot of them. But I loved him coming in, 6'2", 200, played for an SEC school. I thought he was going to be very, very good in Carolina.
Right.
And then it just never materialized. And now there's no DJ Moore there, but you have Adam Thielen. They drafted the kid Mingo out of Ole Miss, who's there right now. They have Laviska Shenault, which say what you will about Shenault, but he is another guy that Marshall's going to have contend for targets. And you have a rookie quarterback there as well in Bryce Young, and we don't exactly know how that's going to go. I don't, normally this is the type of guy I'd take a chance on in Dynasty. But again, if you're playing with 20-man rosters, 22-man rosters, I don't know if I'm willing to give up much for him, because I don't necessarily see a future for him in Carolina to be the type of guy who's going to, command 100+ targets a year and ever be that number one receiver, even when Adam Thielen hangs it up, which I think could be after this season.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're on the same page tonight. I certainly would not roster him in an FFPC league. And honestly, I don't even want him in a league with 30 or 35 roster spots. I think the perception is he kind of had a breakout season last year, especially after the Panthers made some moves and traded McCaffrey and made some of those other moves. But even looking back at his game log, he was not a wide receiver one ever, not one time in his 2-year career. There's one game where he was a wide receiver 2 and scored 14 fantasy points. That's it. One wide receiver 2 game in 2 years. And now he's got Thielen and Mingo and Chark to compete with. Yeah. I want no part of Terrace Marshall at all.
You say we're on the same page, and I didn't mention this before, but I have Allen Robinson in way too many dynasty leagues. He was a guy. He was my. What was the guy from Brokeback Mountain? He was my Ennis, essentially.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I could not quit him. Right, like I would acquire him. I'd pick him up. Like and I still got him. I haven't cut him anyway. I'm still keeping him on my roster. That may change, at cutdowns at the start of the season. But I'll tell you another guy that I was, and this is redraft and dynasty the last couple of years. In Josh Palmer. This is a player that I was collecting late in best ball leagues. He was a guy I was collecting in my dynasty leagues as like my last receiver, because I looked at it from a perspective like, okay, this guy's not a day 3 pick. Like there is some draft capital here that the Chargers invested in. And Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, no strangers to the training table, right? They missed games. And Palmer, by the way, in a couple of games where Williams, I can't remember if it was Williams or Allen who was hurt last year, he showed up, had a lot of targets, a lot of catches. He looked great. And then the cap numbers that these guys are going to be facing coming into 2024 are astronomical. And I know they could, renegotiate and get that number down, what have you. But Palmer, man, I have him on way too many teams. And then I was excited. Okay, it looks like, we're going to be wheels up for Palmer again this year, just a waiting game. And then they go and draft Quentin Johnston. And now I'm officially, the dream is over. The Josh Palmer dream is over for me. I'm never going to get a big time season from him. There's just too much going on in that offense. Even if Williams or Allen leaves next year, now they have Johnston. Man, I could not be more sour on Josh Palmer. I don't know if he even has any trade value left. What are you doing? I don't know if you have Josh Palmer on any of your rosters, but if you do, what are you doing with them?
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe this is the spot where we're not on the same page. I still believe in Josh Palmer. A lot of it is of course because of this offense. This is another one of those teams we want pieces of. And when you look at those 3 receivers, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, the addition of Quentin Johnston, it destroyed Josh Palmer's value, right? You look back at our November ADP, November 2022, just 6 months ago. Josh Palmer was a top 100 player in Dynasty ADP, according to DLF. Now he's barely a top 100 wide receiver. He's wide receiver 96. He was wide receiver 60 2 months ago. So the addition of Johnston just killed Palmer's value. But to me, that pick is more about, and you kind of alluded to it there, it's more about Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Both of those guys have had trouble staying on the field. Both of those guys are, honestly nearing the ends of their career as good as they've both been, especially Allen. They're nearing their career. I think Allen's over 30 and Williams is getting close. So we got to be patient with Josh Palmer. I know that's tougher to do, of course, in FFPC leagues when you're limited to those 20-man in-season rosters. But I like Josh Palmer as a guy to buy, stash, and see what happens in 2024.
Do you think that the Chargers would part ways with both Williams and Allen? Because if that happens, then yeah, I'm all in on Palmer again. I just think that it's going to be one of them, and then Palmer's like, he's probably going to be the number 3. Well, I shouldn't say. Let me not put words. I don't want to put words in your mouth. What did you do with Quentin Johnston in your rookie drafts, Ryan? Did you like him?
I was kind of in step with everyone else as the draft got closer. I was a little worried. It looked like maybe he would fall to day 2. I think there's still reasons to be concerned. He got the draft capital and the landing spot, right? Like both of those boxes got checked. So he went from a guy that we were all kind of down on to back in the good graces, and he's a mid first rounder now. I haven't taken him anywhere. Haven't had the opportunity to, honestly, but I mean, I'd rather have Zay Flowers if that says anything.
Yeah, no. Okay. So that, I think for me, and this might be my whole Josh Palmer thing over and over again, but there was one league where I was like, I could have taken Flowers or I could have taken Johnston, and I took Johnston based on the opportunity there. And I guess you could probably, honestly, now that I think about it, you could probably make the same case in Baltimore, right? Because we don't know if Rashad Bateman is, we know the Ravens drafted him, but it's not like he's lived up to expectations there, and he's missed some time. And we don't know about Beckham. I mean, Beckham could be a 1-year thing, and then that's it. So then all of a sudden it's looking like wheels up for Flowers there. So maybe the opportunity thing is a little bit overrated in Los Angeles, because you can make the same case for Zay Flowers. We've been talking about wide receivers for quite a while. I do want to shift back to the tight ends here. Jake Ferguson was a player, a former Wisconsin Badger. God bless his heart. Love him. But now this Schoenmaker draft pick for Dallas is kind of muddied the waters a little bit on Jake Ferguson. Now, in dynasty startups right now with the FFPC, Jake Ferguson is currently going as the tight end 32 at the 1704, whereas Schoenmaker is going, I believe, much higher than that, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to find it on my screen here. Tight end 25, 1511. So, about 2 rounds ahead. Do you have a preference there? I mean, it is Schoenmaker, right? Because the draft capital. I just like Ferguson. I like what he's able to do from a fantasy football standpoint.
Yeah, I like him as well. I think they got some solid play from Ferguson and from the other rookie, Hendershot, as well last season. So, honestly, I was not surprised. I don't think many were surprised that they let Dalton Schultz go. I was kind of surprised that they took Schoenmaker, though, on day 2. I thought they would add some competition. I didn't think they would use that high of a pick on a tight end. To me, it's a committee, right? I don't think either of these guys right now are good enough or have shown enough to be the clear lead guy. So if I'm getting a discount on Jake Ferguson, whether it's a startup draft or a trade with an existing league, I'm taking a shot on him. I think he has just as good of a chance to end up as the starter and kind of the leader in targets among the tight ends as Schoenmaker.
I want to talk about the elephant in the room as far as tight ends go in Dynasty. And that was so many people, and I don't know if you had the same experience, so many people thrilled that that Buffalo traded up to grab Dalton Kincaid late in the first round of the draft. But there was also a bunch of people who had shares of Dawson Knox whose hearts were breaking at that point. And it is more true than ever. Dalton Kincaid in FFPC Dynasty Startups, tight end 7. He is going at the 603. Ryan, that's right behind George Kittle. It's right behind Dallas Goedert. It is ahead of players like Pat Freiermuth, Michael Mayer, and Darren Waller. Dawson Knox, I kind of alluded to this before, but I'll bring it up again in case you're just tuning in. Dawson Knox, tight end 22 at the end of the 14th round. Is there something to be said that the value on Knox is better than the value it is on Kincaid? Or do you look at this from the standpoint, and I always think about Glenn Lowy, longtime FFPC high-stakes player, has won boatloads of cash. He's a longtime Dynasty player as well, and he always says elite talent over everything else. Well, Kincaid is an elite talent, and I think for me, I'm kind of letting draft capital, fantasy football draft capital, take a back seat. I'd be much more likely to take Dalton Kincaid in whatever I said, the 6th round, rather than Dawson Knox in the 14th.
Yeah, I would as well. And elite talent. Yeah, I'm with him on that one. But at the same time, I don't mind rostering Dawson Knox still, especially in those tight end premium leagues. You look what he's done over the past 2 seasons. He's been a tight end 1 in 43% of his games. And we've already heard it out of Buffalo that they envision using Dalton Kincaid more as a wide receiver. So I think we could certainly see both of these guys on the field at the same time. Knox has been a red zone threat. It's been tough to know when to click that button, right? When are you going to start Dawson Knox? When is he going to get you the touchdown versus when he's not? That's the challenge. But with this discount, this newly formed discount here, he's down to tight end 27 in our data. I love taking a chance on Dawson Knox, and I kind of want Kincaid too. I want them both.
I want much more analysis on Dynasty Fantasy Football from Ryan McDowell at Ryan MC. Is it Ryan Mick23? When you tell people to follow you, you say Ryan MC23. Do you say Ryan Mick23? How do you do it?
I think I do both like you have. I usually say MC, I guess. I guess I say MC.
Ryan MC23 on Twitter, the Dynasty League Football Scribe. You can check out his work at Dynasty League Football. We got so much more to get to. In fact, when we kick off hour number 2 here in just a couple of minutes, we're going to take a look at the Dynasty backfield landscape. I say backfield because we're going to look at running backs and quarterbacks. We touched a little bit about Jahmyr Gibbs. I want to really get into that. I want to talk about Josh Jacobs. Why is he not seen as more of a buy from Dynasty owners? We're going to talk about the Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet situation going on in Seattle, Matt Breida versus Eric Gray, and then, of course, Justin Fields, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, and those pesky 49ers quarterbacks. We're going to get into that in hour number 2 as well. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the High Stakes Fantasy Footballer, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. He's Ryan McDowell from Dynasty League Football. Don't go anywhere. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show right here on the Better Sports Network.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show with Eric Balkman.
What can we expect from you out there on the track tonight?
Listen, I have a wife, 2 kids. I have, full-time jobs. I'm never nervous. I don't even know what that word means. Can you explain what nervous means? No. I'm ready to have fun. I've never done anything like this before. I got asked to be a part of this. This is fascinating. Like, it's so cool to just look around and see what goes on here. So I'm just excited to get out on the horse. And you want trash talk? Is that what you're asking me for? No trash talk. I hope everyone does well.
All right. Everyone's going to do well, but it has to be a winner. So give me your trifecta. Who's going to come in first, second, and third? Heat.
I will go Maria 1, me 2, Willie 3, Moose goes 4th.
Well, it's very simple. I won this event last year. I won my heat, and so the defending champ has to be the favorite. Now, that makes me a little nervous just because I feel like it's hard to repeat. There's a little pressure when you're the favorite, but that being said, I'm still optimistic.
So your heat, it's you,
yes.
Moose and Keith from Better Sports Network, and Willie Colon.
I think Keith might be my stiffest competition, and I asked for this because I actually recruited Keith, if you didn't know. So Keith, if you win, you're welcome.
Malusis is very good. I mean, he knows what he's doing, but I'm going to go with Maria.
Keith is waving to the crowd. He must pay attention because they're off. It's Mark Malusis going for the lead. Maria Marino on the outside, and now Keith Irizarry on the outside with speed, and they're 3 wide into the first turn. Woo! Mark Malusis is locked in for his life. 138 and 2. They're into the stretch. Sportscasters Derby 2. And still in front, Keith Irizarry. And now Mark Malusis is trying to squeeze on through.
Come on! Come on! Let's go! Come on, dig it! Yeah!
Keith Irizarry. Keith, you did it all the way, wire to wire. Over Mark Malusis.
Awesome! That was so cool!
The champ is here! Keith, what was it like being out there? Adrenaline rush. You were doing the Instagram Live, so there was no panic. You looked cool, calm, collected the whole time, and you won it.
I felt really comfortable. I did. Like, I know you were joking with me before. Are you nervous? Are you whatever? What are you? David, the driver, was awesome. He's like, we're going to win this. I said, all right, let's win this. And he said, let's go. Yeah, I just felt really comfortable. I did. It was fun. We're in the lead. I got Maria Marino on the right side of me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to beat us, right? And then out of nowhere, you see Moose coming up this way, and we feel him breathing down our neck. And I'm like,
Moose
no,
on the loose. Watch
Moose.
out.
Moose was definitely on the loose, and we just got Moose by a neck, a nose, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but again, all of this for a great cause, and it was absolutely awesome to do this. It was cool.
All right, Keith, congratulations. And no matter what, you could always hold this over Moose's head.
It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
8:05 in the PM, and you are watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show from the FFPC right here on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman at Eric Balkman on Twitter from the FFPC, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and of course the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Guest co-hosting with me this week is Ryan McDowell at RyanMC23 on Twitter. You check out all his stuff at DynastyLeagueFootball.com, the Locked On Dynasty podcast, Dynasty League podcast. It's just everything. You're doing everything, Ryan. Your duties have expanded. You've hit the ground run. Like, how long have you been in the industry? I mean, this is going on 2 decades. Is that too much?
Yeah, I guess officially we're into our second decade. I
Right.
think. Let's see. I think I've been at DLF for 11 years now.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought it was longer. It just seems longer because you put out so much great content. I just assumed
thank you.
you've been there for forever. Yeah. No, congratulations on that. Keep it up. And I think the thing I want to, well, first of all, I want to tell everybody, in case you missed the first hour, we've been going hard on a lot of Dynasty player analysis for Dynasty Fantasy Football. And remember, if you want to put this this content, this knowledge, this analysis to good work, register for Dynasty Startups now at myffpc.com. We have drafts going from the $100 level all the way up to the $5,000 level. We've been doing Dynasty for nearly a decade, well over 1,300 leagues. No leagues have ever folded, ladies and gentlemen. So make sure you're registering for Dynasty League football leagues, Dynasty Fantasy Football Leagues at myffpc.com. Dynasty League Football is where you go for the analysis on this. You tweeted out a graph. This was, I think, yesterday, I want to say. And it was all about the class of 2017 running backs.
Oh, yes.
Aaron Jones, Kamara, Eckler, McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, James Conner, Mixon, Kareem Hunt, and Leonard Fournette. Huge class. Unbelievable class. I want you to talk about the graph comparing their ADP over the years since they've been in the league, what have you. And I want, more specifically, I want you to talk about the statement that you tweeted along with this, how that class of 2017 changed the way we play Dynasty Fantasy Football.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a game-changing running back class, and that rookie class was strong from top to bottom. Gave us some great tight ends as well, and a couple decent quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes. But the running backs were, to me, the real story here. And I look back at our ADP, and you look back to 2014. Just focusing on the first round of Dynasty ADP. 8 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 3 running backs. I think this is really the Trent Richardson effect, because Trent Richardson was a rookie in 2012, had a strong rookie season, and by a year later, he was the 101 in Dynasty startup drafts. Mm-hmm. And then he bombed, right? He got traded, he bombed, and he was out of the league before we knew it. And I think for a lot of reasons, that turned Dynasty players away from the running back position in general. We saw seemingly more injuries. We saw more running back committees kind of taking over the league. And it really changed the way that we drafted. By 2016, there were 9 wide receivers, 3 running backs in the first round. And we saw that continue really until 2017. And that group of running backs came in and balanced things out. 2018, 5 wide receivers, 7 running backs. 2019, 6 and 6. 2020, 2 wide receivers and 10 running backs made up the first round of our Dynasty ADP. And now we're back to kind of a balance. 6-6 is where we are right now. So I think we're actually starting to see kind of the swing again. We'll talk about some of these running backs. But I think we're starting to see wide receivers take over again, because that 2017 class is kind of aging out. And the graph I shared with was their ADP broken down by age. So we see a couple of those guys have already turned, actually a handful of those guys have already turned 28 years old. And obviously, except for Christian McCaffrey, their value is trending down now after, after 5 years of solid play and honestly, just carrying the running back position.
Yeah, and I think it's compelling. I think it's something we need to keep in mind as far as those running back. It's just an insane year, an absolute insane year for Dynasty Fantasy Football rookie drafts in regards to the running back position that year. I knew, Ryan, when I was watching the first round of the NFL draft this year, that when the Lions drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, the fallout, the reverberation, the shock was not going to be simply over with by the time the draft was over. It wasn't going to be over with by the time rookie draft started. It's not going to be over with for a while. And I feel like I've picked so many people's brains on this, but I'll phrase the question about Jahmyr Gibbs I have for you this way. How were you approaching Jahmyr Gibbs prior to the NFL draft? And how has that changed, if at all, after you saw what the Lions did, taking him at 12th overall?
Yeah, I think it's really a struggle to decide what you think about Jahmyr Gibbs from a dynasty standpoint, and honestly, even more difficult from a redraft standpoint, because he got the draft capital much higher than anyone expected. The landing spot, I think can be debated. Obviously, he's going to share that backfield with David Montgomery, who they spent a decent amount of money on. There's questions about Gibbs' pass protection and his size, and I think most of those can be dispelled or dismissed. He's simply a playmaker, and my concern now is can that position, can that role work in the Lions offense? We haven't really seen it work yet, but maybe that was the DeAndre Swift issue and not an offensive issue, big picture with the Lions. But kind of going back to that class of 2017 running backs, we're seeing most of those guys lose value. We're seeing some other running backs lose value, maybe due to competition in their own backfield. And because so many running backs are trending down right now, that's kind of left the door wide open for Jahmyr Gibbs. He's the running back 6 for us over at DLF. I'm interested to see what your all's data says. He's 14 overall, just outside of the first round of dynasty startups, those one quarterback leagues. He's expensive. He's going to cost a lot to get on your roster.
All right. So I'll bring this up. This is an analogy I've made a couple of times on the show, but I'll bring it up again. It's a crowd pleaser. Did you watch The Office, Ryan?
Oh yeah, sure.
So there is an episode where, and it's one of my favorite episodes, where James Spader, this is post Steve Carell, James Spader, Robert California, brings everybody to his house, right? And for the big pool party. And during that party, I think it's when right before he jumps into the pool naked, he said something, or maybe it was when Ryan and Gabe were dancing in front of the fire later on. I can't remember where he said it. Not important. What he said was, "It's not a party unless you do something that scares you." And I got to tell you, it's not a dynasty fantasy football league until you draft somebody that scares you. And Jahmyr Gibbs would scare me right now. He's running back 6 at DLF. He's running back 5 right now with the FFPC. Now he is going. This is interesting because you said he's going right outside the first round, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's going at running back 5, but it's not till the 205. So he's basically in the middle of the second round. You have 8 receivers going in front of him and 1 quarterback, and then obviously 4 running backs as well. But man, I'll tell you what, drafting Jahmyr Gibbs, that would scare me at the 205. But maybe listen, we all live dangerously, right? If you want to do that, good, more power to you. Good on you to do it. I'm not a strong enough man to do it. I will be taking somebody else. I mean, like guys like T. Higgins, Travis Kelce, Devontae Smith, Tyreek Hill, all those guys, Josh Allen, even in a single quarterback league, they're all going after Jahmyr Gibbs. I think that it's reasonable to take any of those guys. But I think the thing with Gibbs is, like I always say, go and get your guys. If he's your guy, go get him. But that doesn't change some of the, I don't want to say red flags, we'll call them yellow flags that you pointed out in regards to pass protection and everything like that.
Yeah, totally agree. I would not use a second rounder on him, especially an early or mid second rounder. Again, I like to build around those wide receivers, fill in the gaps with running backs later. And I see a lot of running backs later I would like to have, and I see a lot of wide receivers in round 2 that I want.
Josh Jacobs is a very interesting player this season. He led the league in rushing last year, just flat out crushed it. And then this we didn't know what team he was going to be on. Quite frankly, technically, we still don't, because he has not signed his franchise tag. He says he's not playing in the voluntary offseason program, which is fine. I mean, like, I don't, because of the new NFLPA collective bargaining agreement, I don't think he has much leverage to stand on here. But the Raiders have added Michael Mayer. They have added Jacoby Myers. They have Jimmy Garoppolo. We had some news on him today about having that foot surgery as well. But Josh Jacobs is a guy that, and I don't know if it's because, he didn't live up to what a lot of people thought that he was going to be in the NFL, and he left a sour taste in people's mouths. But the dude is putting up numbers. He's running back 9. You can get him at the 305 right now in FFPC dynasty leagues. But as far as trades go, Ryan McDowell, what would you be ponying up to acquire Josh Jacobs if that's the approach that you would tell our viewers to be doing?
Yes, absolutely. I would. Undervalued. I kind of dug into some numbers on him lately. You mentioned he led the league in rushing. He led all running backs with 93 first downs last year as well. Second place had 69. So 93 to 69. He led all running backs with 47 broken tackles, and he had over 1,100 yards after contact. Only 9 other running backs had that many total rushing yards. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, just a monster season. I think the narrative on him is that it was this breakout season that came out of nowhere. And yes, it was his best year he's had, but he's been an RB1 for 3 straight years now. RB21 in his rookie season when he missed a couple of games. And since then, RB8, RB12, and RB3. And if you look at the active running backs who have put up 3 RB1 seasons by age 24, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, Zeke Elliott, Josh Jacobs. That is pretty good company. He's RB10 in our data over at DLF, 31 overall. So again, kind of in line with what you guys are seeing. Absolutely, to me, one of the top trade targets you can find if you're in a win now league. And another tweet I had back in the early part of the season was, if Josh Jacobs was a rookie, we would have already moved him to RB2 by now, because I mean, he was 24 years old at that point. If you go back a little over a year, we basically did that with Najee Harris, who was a 23-year-old rookie, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. He had a great rookie season, and we bumped him to that RB2, maybe even RB1 if you were aggressive, RB1 spot. And certainly Josh Jacobs has gained value over the past year, but I don't think he's gained enough, honestly.
Yeah. And you make the great point too. Like, it seems weird to do it, but listen, go out and get him if you are that one piece away. I mean, this guy could put you over the top in a big way this coming year too. So I think that's worth pointing out.
Would you rather have Gibbs or Jacobs in Dynasty right now?
Well, I mean, it kind of depends where you're at.
Yeah,
but
sure.
If win now, totally Jacobs, and not close. If I'm rebuilding, well, that's a different conversation. But let's face it, elite Dynasty players like us, Ryan, we never rebuild. We just reload, right?
Well, and if you're rebuilding, you don't want running backs at all, right?
Exactly.
Figure out running back later.
Yes. Kenneth Walker. I always bring this up. I was right here on the Better Sports Network, covering the NFL draft. with Andrew Cooper and Mark Malusis, and this pick for Zach Charbonnet to Seattle came down, and we were all floored. We couldn't believe it. He is now running back 24, is Charbonnet, in the 6th round. Kenneth Walker has tumbled from a first-round dynasty startup pick, maybe even a top half of the first-round dynasty startup pick, to running back 8. He is now going in the 304 spot. Is that fair for him? Has he tumbled too far? Your thoughts on Zach Charbonnet as well. What do you do with these 2 Seattle running backs? And quite frankly, and I know I just asked you like 4 questions. I'm going to ask you another one, Ryan. How many shares of Charbonnet did you get in your dynasty rookie drafts?
I haven't got any yet, but it's not for a lack of trying. I want Charbonnet. Of course, we've seen the ADP for him fall, both in our rookie ADP and, of course, dynasty startup ADP. And as it's fallen for Walker, it's fallen for Charbonnet as well. And I mean, these guys are going to get in each other's way, right? When it comes to fantasy production, there's no way around that. But I don't think it's the killer for Charbonnet that we maybe originally thought it was. And in fact, if we're talking about an at-cost situation, Kenneth Walker in the late 2nd or early 3rd versus Zach Charbonnet in the 7th or 8th, or wherever he's coming off the board, I'm certainly taking Zach Charbonnet there. I mean, you look at Kenneth Walker. He was sharing that backfield, or, that's probably not even fair. He was the clear number 2 until Rashad Penny got hurt. And as great as he was down the stretch, this draft pick says a lot about how they view Walker and how they view their backfield plan in general.
What do you make of Kenneth Walker? He had one game, November 13th, against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he had 6 catches. He had one game where he had 4, but then it was like 3, 2, 1, or 0, and mostly 1s and 0s the rest of the way.
Yeah.
He only had 27 catches last year. Is there something, because we high stakes players, we always want to get that pass catching running back. Is there something to be said for saying like, okay, I'm totally skipping over Kenneth Walker. I'm going to get Zach Charbonnet on a lot more. Like if I have 10 dynasty leagues, or if I have 10 leagues where I'm going to get a Seattle running back, 7 or 8 of them are going to be Charbonnet, and maybe only 1 or 2 of them are going to be Kenneth Walker. Is that the approach we should have, given the draft capital, given the cost in drafts, and given the pass catching prowess?
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, when it comes to pass catching, Charbonnet said he went back to school to improve on his pass catching, and he did have a better year when it comes to catching the ball this past year than his previous years in college, both at UCLA and at Michigan. But it's not like, I mean, he's no Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon A-Chain, right? I mean, he is not an elite pass catcher out of the backfield. I think he's better than Walker, but that's not saying much. And I think it's notable that they drafted Kenny McIntosh on day 3, who is a solid pass catcher out of the backfield. Mm-hmm. So one, if you're looking for that pass catching running back, I'm not sure Seattle is the place to look for it in general. And we've seen it every year with Pete Carroll. They're, unless Marshawn Lynch is on that roster, we're going to see multiple running backs throughout the game, throughout the season, honestly. So I think we probably got a little spoiled with that Kenneth Walker run late in the season, and we're going to see a committee here, obviously.
I know we're not going to see a committee in New York, but I know that there has been a conversation about Eric Gray in rookie drafts and how excited people are to draft him as, because they're just assuming, okay, well, he's give me the guy behind Barkley. Maybe he only plays, we referenced this with Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the first hour. Maybe he only plays a couple of games for me in managed leagues this year, or even best ball, dynasty, what have you. But those weeks could be very valuable. Yet Matt Breida is still there. And you have a situation where everybody is zigging to Eric Gray. Is the proper play to actually be avoiding Eric Gray in your rookie drafts and then picking up Matt Breida maybe later on in free agency? Who do you think is the true handcuff here? And what kind of value is there for the backup running back behind Barkley?
I still think Breida's the handcuff. The good news is both of these guys are cheap enough that you could potentially get them both. I mean, roster spots are the challenge there. If you're trying to if you've already got Barkley and you're trying to pick the handcuff, you probably don't have room for 3 Giants running backs. But looking at our rookie ADP, Eric Gray has an ADP of 4.01. He's the RB 13. So you only have to spend your late third or early fourth rounder on him. Matt Breida does not even have an ADP at DLF right now. So, he's essentially free. So again, the challenge is going to be deciding which one to keep come roster cut down time. And are they, is that guy one of your top 20? Probably not.
Yeah. It's tough because and you bring it up, if you have Barkley, it's one of those things and I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's something out there, but all the FFPC dynasty leagues are closed 12-team leagues, right?
Right.
So there is, it's more advantageous to have the backup on your team in that situation. You cannot have 2 of them. You just can't. It doesn't work out. You either got to have one or none. And it seems like everybody is betting on door number 2, the mystery box, right? And Eric Gray. We don't know. We've seen Matt Breida. We know what he is, but it seems like everybody else everybody wants to get on Eric Gray just in case he is a big time talent. Running back 65 at the end of the 60th round. That's bad. Well, Matt Breida, like DLF, he's not being drafted in the FFPC startups either. So if you want to get him, he will be free. We've been talking a lot about running backs, but let's shift the focus to quarterbacks here. Let's talk about this comparison. Ryan McDowell from Dynasty League Football. Who would you rather have in your Dynasty League at quarterback? Justin Fields or Anthony Richardson? I'm not going to give you any caveats. I'm not going to tell you the type of league. I'm not going to tell you the scoring. Just in general, Fields or Richardson, you can only have one. Who are you a bigger believer in investing in right now?
I think it's closer than maybe a lot of people would think, but I'm still going to go with Justin Fields. We saw elite production from him, even with his struggles as a passer last year. I don't think he'll match the rushing output that he gave us. I mean, he broke the record multiple times, basically.
Right.
Last season, the rushing yardage for a quarterback. So I don't think we can expect that, but I do expect improved passing. They've added DJ Moore there, as we talked about earlier, another year with Claypool, another year with Cole Kmet, and hopefully they get Mooney healthy. So I'm excited about both of these guys, but we've already seen it from Justin Fields. So
right.
I'll take Fields, but I do think I think it's a debate. I think it's a discussion for sure.
Do you think Fields can because I'm assuming he runs less this year because number one, he should be a better passer. Number 2, they have better weapons around him. Number 3, you just can't keep that up for the course of the season and still remain healthy. Do you think his improved passing numbers and the fact that the passing game should be upgraded this year, is that enough to keep those numbers elite, knowing that he's not going to be breaking any, or at least we don't think he's going to be breaking any quarterback rushing records this year?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the steady improvement for Lamar Jackson. We talked about him earlier, for Josh Allen. I mean, these guys have all entered the league with questions about their passing efficiency and really their passing ability in general. So I don't think we can assume that Justin Fields will make that same type of production or of improvement. And honestly, Anthony Richardson is facing a similar battle. I think that's why those two are so such an interesting comparison right now.
We've talked several times about Lamar Jackson tonight. I want to ask you if you are a Louisville Cardinal fan or UK Big Blue Wildcat.
Yeah, I'm a Wildcat fan for sure.
Okay, perfect.
I am a Lamar fan, but yeah, when it comes to teams, I'm cheering for Kentucky.
So tell me about Will Levis, a guy who was beat out by Sean Clifford at Penn State and then came in and set the world on fire in the SEC, and then fell to the second round. A little bit surprising, I think for some people. Some people weren't surprised at all. Your thoughts on what you should be doing, not only what kind of career Will Levis is going to have in Tennessee, but your thoughts on how do you handle him in a, let's frame it as a rookie draft super flex league, or maybe just a super flex startup.
Yeah, I'm excited about Levis, of course. Admittedly, a bit of a homer here, but trying to trying to stay realistic and fair. There's obvious reasons for concern with his game and having to transfer to get on the field, and just really the rough 2023 season he had, or 2022 season he had. But there's a lot of reasons for that. We could call them excuses as well, but I think Tennessee is the perfect landing spot. Of course, it hurts that it had to be round 2 versus the middle of round 1, but I love the landing spot. I think Tannehill stays. It still seems like there's at least the possibility that maybe they move on from Tannehill before the start of the season. I think it's a great spot for Levis to learn from Tannehill for a year and then hopefully take over that job. But again, at the price we're talking about with Levis, I love the investment. He's a late first rounder, maybe even an early second rounder in Superflex rookie drafts, and in our Superflex leagues. He's in that 20. Let me find the exact number. Yeah, quarterback 28, according to our data for Superflex startup drafts. He's behind Jimmy Garoppolo, behind Trey Lance and Brock Purdy. So I think there's certainly some room to grow there.
The last thing I want to get to in this segment, and I feel like sometimes the viewers of this show are like, oh, we're talking about this again. Yeah, we're talking about the 49ers quarterbacks again, because it's just there's just always something new.
Yeah.
First it was going to be Trey Lance. And then it was going to be, Sam Darnold is out there now. And now it seems like Brock Purdy, the plan is to have him ready for week 1. This is maddening for people who are drafting in best ball leagues right now, like Superflex best ball leagues, for instance. And then Dynasty, we're trying to square these guys up and figure out who's going to make the cut, who's not, who should we trade, who should we trade for? What are you doing with the Niners quarterbacks, Ryan, in your leagues?
Well, I mean, I am of the belief that Brock Purdy will win that job and will be the starter, assuming he's healthy. I think I think we just saw too much success from a team level last year. At the same time, we didn't see a ton of individual success from Purdy, right? I mean, it was really kind of a smooth transition from Garoppolo to Purdy, because while they both, air quotes, were winners, right? They had that team success. They did not put up huge fantasy numbers. So I think I'm trying to take this opportunity to sell Brock Purdy based on the assumption that he's, some type of high level fantasy producer, which I don't think he is. And at the same time, because of some of the same reasons, I'm buying Trey Lance. If he doesn't win that job, I think there's a good chance that he is traded. And I want to see him, I want to see him in a new spot. I want to see him obviously on the field, and I still believe in his upside. His price is way down, which I want to take advantage of.
And he's the type of guy that you will make room, even if it is Purdy, you will make room for him on your roster because you believe, look, this guy is going to have value. If it's not San Francisco, it sure as heck is going to be somewhere.
Yeah. And that's the downside with the Levis pick to Tennessee, because it did seem like there was a connection between the 49ers and Tennessee. Ryan Carthon there in Tennessee now, coming from San Francisco. And, there's still those rumors and reports that Shanahan didn't really want to draft Trey Lance, wasn't all in on that pick. Of course, we heard a lot of Mac Jones rumors when they traded for that pick, and ultimately they select Lance. So I'm kind of buying into that Shanahan never really wanted Lance. Sending him to Tennessee seems like it made a lot of sense pre-draft, not so much anymore.
Right. Exactly. Great stuff from you on the backfield. We have not talked about the pass catchers yet. What we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the San Francisco quarterbacks equivalent for the wide receivers, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs. Michael Gallup, we're going to talk about his comeback this year. We're also going to get into the Jalen Hyatt and Sam Laporta hype trains. Will Ryan McDowell and I be jumping on, or will we be waving at those trains as they go rushing by us? That and more. We'll get into Juwan Johnson, Hayden Hurst, plenty more Dynasty League football discussion, who Ryan writes for, dynastyleaguefootball.com, at RyanMC23 on Twitter. Ryan McDowell joining me here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show with Eric Balkman.
Anybody who's watching this, getting ready for the rookie draft, so let's do an all-out blitz on this. Should you be drafting for need, or should you be drafting for talent? And I'll give you an example. Oftentimes, I have pretty good receivers. My receiver core is usually really good for my dynasty teams. My running back core, usually not so bueno. I don't know if I just focus on receivers and tight ends too much, but my running backs, I usually need players here. If I am sitting at like the 103, the 104, the 105, should I be, reaching on a guy like Zach Charbonnet, or should I be looking at drafting guys like Jackson Smith and Jigba, or Dalton Kincaid, or Jordan Addison, stuff like that? How do you handle weighing drafting for need versus talent for rookie drafts, Pat?
Generally, I think it makes sense to go with the talent and, like talent over need. And I do think, best ball drafts are a little differently because you can't make moves in season. But in managed leagues, whether it's redraft or dynasty, I think positional balance is like the most overrated thing in fantasy. You can make trades, go with the talent, go with the value on the draft board, and worry about positional balance later on.
However you're invested in sports, from betting to fantasy, collectibles, and more, join our community on Better Sports Network.
The Detroit Lions select Sam Laporta, tight end, Iowa.
Had to go with your boy Sam Laporta there to pair with TJ Hawkinson.
Sammy. I couldn't double down on rookie tight ends. I think that would take it. That's taking it a little too far.
This could be one of the most exciting rookie tight end classes in a while, just based on the archetypes of these guys, of the Dalton Kincaids, of the Sam Laportas. Obviously, Green Bay drafted two themselves with Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. So after Kincaid, I would say is probably the consensus with tight ends. Like, who do you like as far as the best ball, like an end of best ball? Do you like Laporta, or is there anybody else you like more?
I do like Laporta. We're looking for guys that can be a top 2 target on their team. So any path, any argument you could make, right? So you can make the argument that Dalton Kincaid is going to be a top 2 target with after Stephon Diggs. You can make an argument that with Jamison Williams suspended, now Sam Laporta is just going to play straight up wide receiver. He looks like a wide receiver. Why can't he line up out wide at split end, right? It's like Marvin Jones and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I would also throw another name in the ring, and I don't mind, since we're doing this for the fans, for the kids. He's still on the board. Luke Musgrave on your Packers. They're not super loaded at wide receiver. We like the guy Reed they drafted, but you never know. So why can't Luke Musgrave be a big slot? In fact, they drafted 2 tight ends, Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. Tucker Kraft is more of an inline guy. They might just go 2 tight ends right away. Tucker Kraft inline, Luke Musgrave in the slot. Why can't he be a target monster for Jordan Love? So those are the guys, those are the conditions that you need for a rookie tight end to succeed. They need to not only be the best pass catching tight end on the team, but a top 2 pass catcher on the team outright. That's how you get Kyle Pitts. Evan Ingram as a rookie was top 5 because Odell Beckham Jr. hurt his knee 4 weeks into the year. So that's the formula. We're looking for guys that can actually be a top target right away. Otherwise, we're playing the sit and wait long-term game, which is what you're doing with guys like Michael Mayer.
It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
Military appreciation is going on the fantasy football draft on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. It's a special event on the Fantasy Alarm Show on SiriusXM. It is going on right now as we speak. It's the Military Appreciation fantasy football draft. Howard Bender from Fantasy Alarm, obviously Jim Bowden from Fantasy Alarm are drafting with 10 members of our military in honor of Memorial Day weekend. The league champion will win 2 tickets to any 2024 NFL game and a custom salute to service jersey. Get a free trial, by the way, of SiriusXM at SiriusXM.com/free-trial. SiriusXM.com/free-trial. Want to welcome back in all you viewers who are watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show here on the Better Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the High Stakes Fantasy Footballer, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. He is Ryan McDowell from Dynasty League Football at RyanMC23 on Twitter. You check out all his work at DynastyLeagueFootball.com. We got done talking about the 49ers quarterbacks in Dynasty, and maybe more maddening, I think back to the New England Patriots running back days, right? Maybe more maddening is the Chiefs and trying to figure out what's going on there. They have Kadarius Toney, who they gave up the draft pick for to acquire last season. They already invested some draft capital, some serious draft capital in Sky Moore last year, and then they invest more draft capital. I think it was day 2 draft capital in getting Rashee Rice on their team this year. Marquez Valdes-Scantling still there to gum up the works and help best ball players out for sure. How do your Kansas City wide receivers shares look like right now? Are you more heavy on one other than the other two? How are you handling this in your dynasty leagues, Ryan?
Really, I'm avoiding all of these guys. Honestly, it is so muddy. I certainly don't want any MVS. I mean, I think we know what he is at this point. I mean, I get the hype. I get the excitement for Kadarius Toney. He's shown us what he can do, but just in such limited fashion. I mean, for every exciting play he has 2 injuries. So I'm shocked that the Chiefs are confident going into the season with him as what they've declared as their number 1 wide receiver. I can't believe it. Of course, they had Juju Smith-Schuster last year, who had a solid, I would say, unspectacular season for them. Ended up with 4 games as a wide receiver 1 plus a 1 wide receiver 2 game in there. I mean, we know Kelsey's the real top target here, but to have this collection, MVS, Toney, Sky Moore, and Rashee Rice, I mean, it's one of those situations. One of those guys is going to catch the ball. Usually, we're saying those types of things about the worst teams in the league, right? That somebody's got to catch the ball. But now it's with the defending Super Bowl champions and one of the best offenses in the league. I mean, at price, I'm fine with Sky Moore. His value was just decimated after last year. Rashee Rice is still a decent value, even though he got a nice bump after the landing spot. Toney, I'm just staying away from, honestly, because there's always going to be somebody in your league that loves Toney, certainly more than I do.
Wide receiver 50 for Rashee Rice right now. Wide receiver 40 for Kadarius Toney. Rice going at the 11:01 of FFPC Dynasty startups. Toney, wide receiver 40 at the 8:11. And then, of course, Sky Moore right now is going at wide receiver 55 at the 12:01. So the way that the high stakes dynasty players have them ranked is basically Toney, then Rice, then Sky Moore. But quite frankly, these guys aren't going, these people are not going hard after any of these Chiefs receivers, basically what you just said. And I think that's the way we have to look at it from a dynasty standpoint. Michael Gallup, former 3rd-round pick in 2018 out of the Dallas Cowboys, had a pretty good season in 2019, 1,100 plus yards, 843 yards in 2020. Tore his ACL, only missed 3 games last season. 39 catches, 424 yards, and 4 touchdowns. It was a career low for him in yards per reception at 10.9. Gallup did say in an interview with a local Dallas radio station that at times his knee did feel sore last year, but he says he feels, quote, springy again. God, if we could all just feel springy again, that would be tremendous. Mike McCarthy said that, yeah, exactly. Mike McCarthy said that Gallup is going to be featured more this season, but obviously CeeDee Lamb is on that team still. And now Brandon Cooks is on that team as well. And if Mike McCarthy is jettisoning Kellen Moore because Kellen Moore wanted to throw all the time, brings in, isn't it Scott? Not Scott Linehan. Who's the guy that they hired as the Schottenheimer? or who is it? Oh, this is
yeah. I'm blanking too.
I'm gonna look it up, but it's a guy who loves to run the football. Where running the football, if Brian Schottenheimer,
Yeah,
where running the football is a good alternative to running the football. It's all he wants to do, and it's all Mike McCarthy wants to do. And I think that's the thing that we have to be concerned about from a dynasty perspective here, because yes, it's good that Michael Gallup now has the full, the sort of the red shirt ACL year behind him.
Mm-hmm.
He should be ready to go and fire on all cylinders. The problem is now you have Brandon Cooks there, and you also have a situation where they want to run the ball a lot with Tony Pollard. I still think Ezekiel Elliott is probably going to return to the Cowboys at a much lower price as well. And if that's the case, man, I'm kind of souring on Michael Gallup. I really don't have any expectations for him this year because of all the reasons I just stated, but maybe mostly because of the presence of both Lamb and Cooks.
Yeah, I had to laugh. I saw a tweet referencing Michael Gallup and kind of this buzz that we're hearing over the past few days, and it was a reminder that wide receivers typically take a full year post ACL to return to elite production, I think is the wording that was used. And, you can't return to elite production if you never have elite production. And that's what we're dealing with Michael Gallup. In his career, he's been a wide receiver 1 in just 9% of games, has not had a top 12 fantasy game since 2020. Of course, that was pre-injury, obviously, actually way pre-injury. He played most of the 2021 season before that injury and didn't do much. He only has even 3 wide receiver 2 games over the past 2 years. So you factor in Brandon Cooks and even the hint that this team might throw less. And I mean, I just have really no use for Michael Gallup, honestly. I write an article at DLF called Roster Clogger. I think Michael Gallup is a roster clogger.
He is a massive roster clogger, no question. Michael Gallup, wide receiver 92 at the 1901. There's no point. Like at that point, do you find this that you're doing this in your dynasty startups, Ryan? When you get to that point in the draft, you're like, oh, I could take Curtis Samuel, I could take Michael Gallup, I could take Terrace Marshall, Chase Claypool, or are you trying to take like guys like Michael Carter, Gus Edwards, Chase Edmonds, like these injury away type running backs? Isn't that a better way to spend your late round draft capital in dynasty startups?
Absolutely. And even if you think, maybe Michael Carter gives me 2 good weeks where I can start him, that's still probably more than you're getting from Michael Gallup. And even if Gallup does pop up with a big game or 2, you have no idea when that's going to happen.
Right.
So whereas with the backup running backs, we can usually figure those things out a little bit better ahead of time. That's also the part of the draft where I start looking at the unknown of these incoming rookies and think, yeah, give me Eric Gray over Michael Gallup, right? Give me a shot on, maybe if he earns that RB2 in New York, he's worth more than the Cowboys wide receiver 3 or 4.
Speaking of New York, the Giants wide receivers. I don't know if you have a favorite one in New York. I mean, obviously Wan'Dale Robinson is there. Isaiah Hodgins came on at the end of last season. Jamison Crowder is still bumming around the league. He's in New York now. Sterling Shepard coming off the knee injury. Darius Slayton, Paris Campbell. There's a lot of wide receivers there. And then there's Jalen Hyatt, a guy that I admittedly was not very high on in the draft. I don't trust the Tennessee Volunteers offense as being a good representation of how these guys are going to perform in the pros. I didn't trust Jalen Hyatt's route, how well he mastered the route tree for Tennessee as well. So I had a lot of questions, and those questions I kind of feel like were confirmed where everybody passed over this dude twice in the draft. And then the Giants finally drafted him in round 3. Your thoughts on Jalen Hyatt, because say what you will about him, and I'm not sold on what he's going to be as a pro, but I can tell you that in that offense, he represents a special set of skills that I don't think any of those other receivers possess.
Yeah, totally agree. It was kind of a series of pros and cons on draft weekend with Hyatt because, this guy was at one time projected as a first-round wide receiver and falls, like you said, passed over multiple times by pretty much every team and falls in the Giants' lap. So, the lack of draft capital or the surprising fall, that hurts. But as crowded as the Giants depth chart is, I do like, and you said it so well there, the skills that he brings that offense. And even with the crowded depth chart, I mean, this just comes down to, I trust Brian Dable to get the most out of this guy. Again, he's going to be tough to know when to start or when to use him, because he is that deep threat, that big play guy. Looking at the depth chart, honestly, well, I will say Wan'Dale Robinson is my sentimental favorite, because again, I'm a Kentucky fan.
UK, baby.
That's right. But man, I think it's hard to ignore what Isaiah Hodgins did to end the season. You look at the last 5 games of the season, he scored at least 14 fantasy points in 4 of those, including a wide receiver 1 game, and really carried that Giants passing game, honestly, into the playoffs. And I think we look at Isaiah Hodgins, and because he was an in-season signing by the Giants, the assumption is that he's just a veteran that's bounced around. That is not the case. He's been in the league for 2 years. He was a mid-round pick by the Bills. They gave up on him for whatever reason, and the Giants took a chance on him when they needed him, and none of their other receivers were healthy. And he produced, and he got another contract out of it. So I think Hodgins is also a guy who has a unique set of skills on that roster, where almost the rest of the receivers, Slayton, Paris Campbell, Wan'Dale, Shepard, they signed Jamison Crowder. I forgot that even happened.
Yeah,
all of those guys, they have like 8 slot wide receivers. Not to mention they bring in Darren Waller, who should lead the team in targets, but we'll see what happens there.
Let's and I want to bring this up too. I know fantasy football obviously dominates Ryan and my life as far as everything that we've been talking about tonight, but there are other sports going on. There's plenty of basketball, baseball. And by the way, if you want to bet on those, remember, you can get a up to $1,000 no sweat first bet using fantasyalarm.com/FanDuel. Deposit $10 or more. You can place your first bet up to $1,000. Get up to $1,000 in bonus bets if you lose. FantasyAlarm.com DraftKings is where you can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets. FantasyAlarm.com/BetMGM, $1,000 paid back in bonus bets if you don't win, and obviously up to $1,250 back on your first bet, plus 1,000 tier credits, plus 1,000 reward credits using promo code FULLFA at FantasyAlarm.com/Caesars. That's FULLFA, FantasyAlarm.com/Caesars. I know a lot of people will be betting on the NFL games, which will be here before we know it, Ryan. Like, I know we're kind of in the quote-unquote dead zone of the NFL season, but there's still plenty of stuff to be talking about. We have not touched on the tight ends as much as I wanted. Juwan Johnson this year, and I'll bring him up right now, and I'll bring up his ADP. Juwan Johnson right now in FFPC startups, you are looking at tight end 21 at the 1403. Again, you kind of want to have that second tight end, sometimes third tight ends, even in the FFPC dynasty leagues, which have short benches, but it's 1.5 premium per catch for tight ends in that format. Juwan Johnson, tight end 21. Is this a player you want to be in business with this year?
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially at that price, similar to what we have tight end 20 over at DLF. From week 7 on last year, he was the tight end 7, competing for work. I don't know if we should even say competing with Taysom Hill, since he was the tight end in name only, but competing with Troutman, who ultimately got traded. But now we're looking at a quarterback upgrade for Juwan Johnson, nominal quarterback upgrade, I guess, but with Derek Carr there now. But then there's this talk about watching Julian Edelman tape and being used in that way, which, I mean, Juwan Johnson is 6'4", 230. I do not think about Julian Edelman when I watch Juwan Johnson play, but I got to say I'm intrigued about what that might look like on this Saints roster. So absolutely love Juwan Johnson as a target right now.
We touched on him earlier in the program, and that's Hayden Hurst, who is now taking his talents to Carolina. We mentioned, sort of the shortcomings of a guy like Terrace Marshall there, and the unknown of Adam Thielen. Can he cobble it together for another year, knowing that he's coming up at the end of his career. We have DJ Chark, who you mentioned, obviously there as well, and then Jonathan Mingo, and they're all catching passes from a rookie quarterback. Is there something to be said for that rookie quarterback in Bryce Young, maybe paying attention to a guy who had 68 targets last year and turned that into 52 catches for over 400 yards in Hayden Hurst? Do you like him, acquiring him cheap, obviously in your FFPC leagues, specifically tight end premium leagues? I think it's interesting. Tight end 36 at the 1802, man, you could get, if you want him, you could easily go out and get this guy right now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you where he was in FFPC, because he is far down the list for us, tight end 39, so even cheaper based on our data. But absolutely, it's a why not situation. What the heck? Take a chance on this guy who did have 4 tight end 1 games last year. It was tough to predict when he would have those games because he was competing with the elite receivers in Cincinnati. Not going to have that same problem this year. I think you're right. He could be a great target in those tight end premium leagues and FFPC or any others.
Give me your 30-second synopsis on Sam Laporta and how you handle him in your rookie drafts right now.
He's going in the late second of a rookie draft, so I love him in that range. He's the tight end 3. Looking at startup drafts, though, he's tight end 10 for us. I think he's just overvalued at that price, so I love him in rookie drafts. I'm staying away in startups.
Staying away and trying to find where he is in startups right now for the FFPC. Tight end 13, is that low enough for you?
That's more in line. Like
getting into that
in our data, he's above Njoku, above Ingram, above Dulcich and Chig. I think he's a little overpriced, but tight end 13's closer to where I think he should be.
He is above Okonkwo and Dulcich for FFPC. He's right behind David Njoku. That's because Njoku's tight end 12.
Yeah.
My God, we could have done 2 more hours with you.
Absolutely.
Tonight, God, this is so much fun. I learned so much. I'm becoming a better fantasy player because of people like you coming on this show. Ryan McDowell at RyanMC23 on Twitter, Dynasty League Football. Is that the best way to consume more Ryan McDowell content? Is there anything you can promote that's coming up for you?
Just continuing to churn out content. We talked about the end of school at the beginning of the show.
Right.
The end of school for me means summer break, and that means more dynasty and fantasy content. So check it out at dynastyleaguefootball.com. As you said, you can follow me at RyanMC23, and got a couple podcasts to check out too. So look for those.
Absolutely. You can check out those podcasts right on Ryan's Twitter profile as well. I want to thank Ryan McDowell, our producer, Anthony Rivera, ladies and gentlemen. We are back not next week at 7/6 Central. I am off. I actually won. I won't bore you with the details, but I won a food contest competition with the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers in gorgeous Appleton, Wisconsin. They chose my recipe to be on their menu all season. And as a result, I get to throw out the first pitch next Thursday night. So no high stakes fantasy football show next Thursday. However, the following Thursday, June 8th, we return live with Draft Sharks Alex Cork, who will join us on the program. That's going to be a lot of fun. Don't forget, myffpc.com is your home for a $1 million grand prize in the Fantasy Pros Championship, a $1 million grand prize in the FFPC main event, Dynasty Startup Drafts. We gave you so many good reasons to play Dynasty Startups. Check that out, myffpc.com. You want to play for $5,000 entry fee? You can do that. Or you can play for a $100 entry fee as well. $200,000 the grand prize in the FFPC Best Ball Tournament, $50,000 in the Superflex Best Ball Tournament, and plenty of closed 12-team leagues there for just $5. Dynasty Nerds with Garrett Price is up next. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you in 2 weeks.